Wrestling fans, if you are not sitting down right now, sit down, because what happened behind the curtain of WWE SmackDown is the kind of backstage explosion that cannot simply be erased with a scripted segment or a smiling social media clip the next morning. I am Salvador, and welcome back to WrestleVault, where we take a closer look at the stories and rumors shaping WWE beyond the headlines. Triple H, the man overseeing WWE creative with an iron fist and a poker face that rarely cracks on camera, reportedly lost his composure in a way insiders say they had not witnessed since he took control of the company's creative direction. The trigger was Gunther, the ring general, after he choked Nick Aldis unconscious in a moment that was presented as part of the storyline but reportedly crossed a serious line backstage. The incident left staff stunned and Triple H furious, but to understand why the reaction was so intense, we have to rewind. The Gunther and Nick Aldis rivalry did not appear overnight. For weeks, Gunther had been increasingly frustrated with decisions coming from the general manager's office. Every time he believed he was moving closer to championship gold, another obstacle appeared in his path. Nick Aldis, meanwhile, was never simply a suit-and-tie authority figure. Before taking on his WWE role, Aldis had already established himself as a legitimate world champion and accomplished professional wrestler. He had spent years proving that he belonged among the biggest names in the business, long before becoming the man responsible for making matches and enforcing decisions. Gunther viewed Aldis as an obstacle. Worse, he viewed him as someone who had no business standing between him and the top of the card. What began with verbal confrontations eventually became physical. The tension escalated with every encounter, until everyone backstage understood that this was no longer a standard disagreement between a wrestler and an authority figure. It was personal. Then came the moment that changed everything. After Gunther was denied another opportunity and continued to see the championship picture move in a direction he did not like, he snapped. He got his hands on Aldis and locked in a sleeper hold, refusing to release him until the general manager was rendered unconscious. For the audience watching at home, it was a shocking television moment. For the people backstage, it was reportedly even more uncomfortable. Wrestlers and producers are accustomed to chaos. They perform dangerous stunts, take hard bumps, and work through physical punishment every week. But there is a major difference between a planned wrestling sequence and a situation where someone appears to lose control. Reports of a stunned atmosphere backstage began circulating almost immediately, and that is where Triple H entered the picture. As WWE's chief content officer, Triple H could not simply stand by and treat the incident as another dramatic angle. A general manager had just been choked unconscious by one of the company's biggest stars. The question was no longer simply whether the angle worked. The question was whether Gunther had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. According to reports, Triple H confronted Gunther and made the seriousness of the situation very clear. The message was reportedly blunt. Under different circumstances, an incident like this could have resulted in Gunther losing his job. Let that sink in. This was not merely an authority figure threatening a wrestler for television. The underlying issue was much more serious. WWE has invested heavily in creating a culture of professionalism and trust among its performers, particularly when physical contact is involved. One reckless decision can destroy that trust. Gunther had put Aldis in a position where a storyline moment could have turned into a legitimate medical emergency. And yet, despite the severity of the incident, Triple H did not simply remove Gunther from television. That decision is where the story becomes far more interesting. Instead of throwing away one of WWE's most valuable performers, the company reportedly transformed the controversy into another piece of the larger storyline. Gunther was forced to face consequences, but those consequences were tied directly to his ambition. Rather than simply ending his push, WWE created a path for him to fight his way back into championship contention. That is an important distinction. Triple H was not necessarily showing Gunther mercy. He was using the situation as leverage. The threat of losing everything was placed in front of Gunther, and then the punishment was turned into motivation. His reckless behavior became another chapter in the story of a wrestler obsessed with becoming champion. That is classic wrestling psychology, consequences without destroying the character. But there is an uncomfortable side to this decision. Gunther had choked a general manager unconscious on television. He had rattled the locker room. He had demonstrated that his aggression could potentially go too far, and instead of being removed from the championship picture, he ultimately remained close to the biggest prize in the company. That raises a legitimate question about the way WWE balances discipline and business. Gunther is not an ordinary mid-card performer. He is one of the company's most protected and recognizable stars. His matches draw attention, his character has tremendous credibility, and his reputation for physical intensity has become one of his greatest assets. That value matters, and WWE knows it. This is where the business side of professional wrestling becomes impossible to ignore. A major company can condemn a wrestler's actions while simultaneously recognizing that the same wrestler is extremely valuable to the product. So instead of eliminating Gunther from the equation, WWE turned his behavior into another obstacle he had to overcome. The situation eventually became connected to a major championship opportunity involving Gunther and Sami Zayn against CM Punk and Cody Rhodes. The stakes were enormous. If Gunther and Zayn won, the championship match at SummerSlam would expand into a fatal four-way. Suddenly, the wrestler who had been staring at the possibility of losing his career was once again staring at a world championship. That contrast tells you everything about how WWE storytelling works. A wrestler can be punished without being discarded. A controversy can become motivation. And an incident that appears to end a character's momentum can sometimes become the very thing that creates another major storyline. But what about Nick Aldis? That is where the emotional side of the story becomes even more complicated. Aldis was the person who absorbed the physical consequences of Gunther's actions. He was not simply an authority figure standing behind a desk. He was a former world champion who eventually stepped away from that role and returned to the ring to confront Gunther directly. When Aldis entered the arena for their eventual showdown, the atmosphere was completely different. He was no longer just the general manager. He was a wrestler. He was a man fighting for his pride after months of humiliation. The presence of his family at ringside added another layer to the moment, making the confrontation feel far more personal than a typical championship storyline. Aldis fought Gunther with everything he had, and the match became a physical battle between two men who had been building toward this confrontation for months. Ultimately, Gunther won using the same devastating sleeper hold that had defined their rivalry from the beginning. From a storytelling perspective, it was a full-circle conclusion. But there is still an uncomfortable question underneath the spectacle. Did WWE ultimately reward the aggressor? Gunther's actions created the controversy, yet Gunther remained one of the central figures in the championship picture. Aldis, meanwhile, became part of the story that helped elevate Gunther even further. That may be good business. It may even be effective wrestling storytelling. But it is understandable why some fans would question the message being sent. And this brings us back to Triple H. His reaction makes sense when you consider his own history as a performer. Triple H knows better than most how important trust is inside a wrestling ring. Performers have to believe that their opponents will protect them. Producers have to know that wrestlers will follow the plan. Management has to trust everyone involved with a live broadcast. When that trust breaks down, the consequences can be serious. That is why the reported anger surrounding Gunther's actions matters. This was not simply a boss becoming annoyed because a segment went slightly off script. It was a veteran performer and company executive recognizing how quickly controlled wrestling violence can become something genuinely dangerous. Gunther's reputation makes the situation even more complicated. He has built his entire identity around being one of the most intimidating and physically dominant wrestlers in WWE. His nickname, the Ring General, reflects that philosophy. His matches are built around punishment, control, and an almost ruthless efficiency. That intensity is exactly what makes him valuable. It is also what makes incidents like this so dangerous. WWE needs Gunther to feel unpredictable, but the company also needs Gunther to remain controllable. That is the line Triple H appears to be walking. And perhaps that is the real story behind the confrontation. The issue was never simply whether Gunther would be fired. The real question was whether WWE could punish Gunther without destroying one of its most valuable characters. So far, the answer appears to be yes. Gunther remains dangerous. Aldis remains a credible authority figure and wrestler, and Triple H has made it clear that there are consequences when the line between performance and reality becomes blurred. The controversy may eventually fade, but the message behind it will remain. In WWE, the most dangerous wrestler is not necessarily the one who hits the hardest. It is the one management believes might actually go too far. And after what happened with Nick Aldis, Gunther may have done more than create another rivalry. He may have reminded everyone backstage exactly why the Ring General is considered one of the most intimidating forces in the company.